Good afternoon again, everyone. I am Karen J. Aquino, and I will be discussing the next topic, which is the information processing theory. So, it is a cognitive theory that focuses on how information is encoded into our memory. It was developed by American psychologists, including George Miller in the 1950s. The theory describes how our brains filter information from what we're paying attention to in the present moment, to what gets stored in our short term or working memory, and ultimately into our long term memory. So, it is another theory that has been used to explain children's cognitive development. And basically, this theory describes how children retain, organize, and use information habang sila ay nag-aaral at kung paano nagbabago ang kanilang mga kakayahan over the course in their cognitive development. Also, ang teoryang ito ay nagpapakita ng kakayahan ng isang bata on how they consume, digest, and regurgitate information. Accordingly, ang mga children ay kumukuha ng inputs from their experiences and process them internally and create behavioral outputs. For example, a 4-year-old child can remember what she did at Christmas and tell her friend about it when she returns to preschool after the holiday. In that way, children can recognize previously encountered information, recall old information, and reconstruct it in the present. So let's move on to the major features of information processing theory. So this is the illustration of cognitive information process memory model. So this is not one single theory but a generic term used to describe all the perspectives that focus how our cognitive process such as attention, perception, encoding, storage, and retrieval of knowledge. It uses a two-store model na kung saan pumapasok ang mga stimuli sa sensory register at mula doon ay pupunta sa short-term memory. Dito, sa pamamagitan ng rehearsal at pag-encode, maaari silang maimbak sa long-term memory. So let's move on to the next slide. Although this theory doesn't occur developmental stages, but we have systems or stages in our memory which are responsible for transferring information from one stage to the next. First, we have the sensory memory. It holds information associated with the senses, for example, vision, hearing, just long enough for the information to be processed further or mere seconds. So it refers to what we are experiencing through our senses at any given moment. Kabilang dito ang ating mga nakikita, naririnig, nahahawakan, nalalasahan at naaamoy. So sensory memory is an ultra short-term memory and decays or degrades very quickly, typically in 1.5 seconds after the perception of an item. Indeed, ito ay tumatagal para sa isang maikling panahon na ito ay madalas na itinuturing na bahagi ng proseso ng pangunawa, but it nevertheless represents an essential step para sa pag-imbak ng impormasyon sa panandaliang memorya. For example, if a child eats something that once made him sick, to his stomach, for example, is the unripe mango, he will have vomiting the next time he eat that food. This is an evolutionary advantage that helps a child avoid poisonous foods by remembering things that may be harmful. So next, we have the short-term memory. Working memory holds information for a limited amount of time and holds a limited amount of information. So it is also known as working memory. It involves our brain selecting information, processing it, assigning it a meaning, and then deciding which pieces to bank in our long-term memory and which to forget. It refers to the ability to recall and process small amounts of information for up to 1 minute. Ito ay ginagamit ng mga students to recall for a variety of skills needed for school success. So, for example, the teacher give a following instruction. So, in that way, students must be able to recall spoken instructions from teacher to be able to perform tasks what were asked of them. So, working memory is an important skill for a student to strengthen. Bagamat ang bawat isa ay nagtataglay nito in some degree, those who actively work to improve it and excel at it can benefit greatly academically. And the last is we have the long-term memory. Represents our permanent storehouse of information capable of retaining an unlimited amount and variety of information. So, while our long-term memory has unlimited space, unlike our sensory and working memories, its effectiveness comes down to how well the information in it is organized. Nagmumula ito sa kung paano nag-encode ang ating utak into the pieces of information. So, ang long-term memory can store information indefinitely. We can move skills and knowledge into long-term memory by repeatedly practicing and using them. So, ang background knowledge at vocabulary na nakaimbak sa long-term memory ay nagbibigay sa mag-aaral ng strong foundation para sa kanilang mga takdang aralin sa pagbasa o sa pagsulat. Next, we have the process of information. So, we don't need just pay attention to the memory system, but also to the processes that keep information alive or help transfer it from one memory stage to the next. First, we have this selective attention. So, it refers to the learner's ability to select and process certain information while simultaneously ignoring other information. For example, the child tends to pick up a toy, examine it momentarily, set it down, and move on to another toy without really taking the time to play with anything. Overly selective attention means that your child is focused on something other than the assigned task. The second, we have the chunking. So it is the process into the short-term memory or working memory that increase the capacity through creating larger bits. So Miller presented the idea that short-term memory could only hold 5 to 9 chunks of information, where a chunk is any meaningful unit. So, for example, the most common example of chunking is the telephone number. Remembering 10 digits, such as 54155532226, is hardly possible. But if the 10 digits are chunked into 3 units, it will be 541-555-3226. Remembering all 10 numbers is easily done. So the third is the rehearsal. So it refers to the manipulation of information currently stored in working memory. Students are focused on his information and need to interact with it in some way or it is forgotten. So the fourth is we have the encoding. So it refers to the process of relating incoming information to concepts and ideas already in memory in such a way that the new material is more memorable. So for example, when a child first learn new skills such as riding a bike, you have to put forth effort and attention to encode information about how to start to push the pedals while at the same time lifting rear in onto seat, how to brake, how to handle a turn, and so on. So once you know how to ride a bike, you can encode additional information about this skill automatically. Process of retrieval from long-term memory includes bringing to mind previously learned information to either understand some new input, making response, and may involve either recall or recognition. This is the theory that teachers should really be familiar with in order to allow students to be better comprehend the lessons being taught dahil mahalaga para sa mga guro na malaman kung paano isinasalob ng mga bata ang impormasyon. So also teachers should know that from this theory of information processing ay ang dating kaalaman ay nakakaapekto sa kung paano pinoproseso ang impormasyon at nang may mga limitasyon sa kung gaano karaming impormasyon ang maaring iproseso ng isang bata o estudyante sa isang partikular na oras. So, this theory also allows an individual or student to understand how they best obtain and retain knowledge.